We do not stand still and are developing for you, so we bring to your attention a new voice and a new story.
Olivia Bennett here, having just arrived after spending 6 years transforming our West Coast operations into a prosperous $20 million division. Upon my return, I found myself completely written out of my father's will. Despite dedicating my whole career to growing Bennett Media Group and sacrificing my personal life for the family business, I came home only to find out that my younger brother David was to inherit everything, while I received nothing at our father's funeral. A discovery made in my father's private study revealed a hidden truth that has forced my family to face decades-long secrets. Before we continue, let me know where you're joining us from. And if this story resonates with you, don't forget to subscribe as I have something extraordinary planned for you tomorrow. The commercial plane landed at Reagan National Airport on a crisp October morning. Unlike my past returns, no welcoming party greeted me this time, no father with a boisterous voice and warm embraces presenting my accomplished executive daughter. No mother fretting over my weight loss after countless late office hours. Only me, my carry-on baggage, and the persistent void in my chest that had accompanied me since receiving the call 2 weeks prior. William Bennett, the founder and CEO of Bennett Media Group, had experienced a massive stroke at his desk. He died doing what he loved, growing the media company from a small radio station into a powerful regional entity with TV, digital, and print divisions in 3 states. The business was the cornerstone of my father's life, and I had echoed his footsteps, turning our faltering West Coast division from the brink of bankruptcy to our most lucrative operation when others predicted its demise. I shifted uneasily in my fitted black pantsuit while traversing a familiar terminal. Previously, I was in Los Angeles supervising the acquisition of a financially troubled digital news platform to complement our West Coast multimedia strategy. This venture was 6 months prior, and it was a project close to my heart, having been researched, negotiated, and led under my guidance with my father's wholehearted support, despite initial board reservations. The resulting success served as the pinnacle of my accomplishment, transforming Bennett Media Group from a traditional broadcasting company into a dynamic digital enterprise boasting diverse income sources. Olivia. My younger brother David was near the baggage claim, his face wearing a well-rehearsed facade of subdued greeting. At 34, 2 years my junior, he embodied the East Coast media executive in his impeccably tailored suit and meticulously coiffed hair. David, I responded, accepting his brief hug. The formality between us was customary. Since childhood, we were more like business partners than siblings. How's our mother doing? As well as could be expected, he responded, taking my luggage. The house has been swarming with visitors, industry folk, family acquaintances, the typical condolence crowd. I acknowledged with a nod, suppressing the intricate feelings his impersonal description invoked. Our father deserved more than being confined to such a condolence circle. You seem exhausted, he remarked as we headed towards the parking garage. The LA branch keeping you occupied? I disclosed that we had recently completed the Skyview digital acquisition. It's been all hands on deck integrating their systems while preserving their innovative spirit. He mentioned it at our last board meeting, David said, maintaining a neutral tone. Considerable investment indeed. An investment already yielding profits, I countered. The latest forecast suggests a 22% surge in digital ad revenue and a 15% expansion in subscription services. Upon reaching his sleek black Mercedes, David merely nodded. The journey to my parents' house in Bethesda, Maryland lasted approximately 40 minutes, filled with uneasy chit-chat about funeral arrangements, attending executives, and anticipated media coverage. David neglected to discuss the company's future leadership, a conspicuous silence that caused my stomach to knot with anxiety. The 2-story colonial remained unchanged, boasting immaculate landscaping, traditional architecture, and understated opulence that mirrored my childhood. As we pulled into the circular driveway, my mother emerged at the entrance, her slender form outlined against the interior's warm light. Olivia? She greeted me with unexpected strength for her petite frame. You've finally returned home. The word home felt both soothing and disconcerting after spending years constructing my life in Los Angeles. I arrived as soon as the acquisition was finalized. Paperwork? I remarked, battling unexpected emotions. How are you truly feeling, Mom? Catherine Bennett scrutinized my face, her own sorrow apparent in the fresh lines around her eyes. Managing, dear one. Your father would have demanded nothing less. I hesitated, looking around the house filled with floral arrangements and catering trays, a testament to the continuous flow of mourners paying their respects. Framed family photographs adorned the hallway entrance, chronicling my father's life from his days as a young radio announcer to becoming a media tycoon. I paused at a photograph of him standing tall beside me at my college graduation, his hand on my shoulder, beaming with pride as I held up my business degree. That was a memorable day, my mother echoed, mirroring my gaze. He had boasted to everyone at the country club that one day his daughter would transform the family business. A knot formed in my throat. He was my greatest supporter. She conceded with a nod, yet her expression held a sense of reserve. He expressed great pride in your achievements in California, a subtle use of past tense noted. The evening meal was a simple gathering consisting of Mom, David, his spouse Jennifer, and myself. Despite it being an opportunity for private mourning, an underlying unease made the dinner awkward. David has been remarkable over the past fortnight, my mother commented, ending a long silence, managing both the corporate change and funeral preparations. The board has been cooperative, David mentioned, avoiding direct eye contact with me. They recognize the importance of stability during these trying times. The wording gave me a shiver. Could you clarify what sort of business alterations are underway? I inquired. My mother and David shared a significant look. Maybe it's not suitable to delve into business matters now, my mother advised. Tomorrow we have the will reading. Everything will become clear afterwards. I insisted on needing to understand if strategic decisions concerning the company, particularly the West Coast operations under my charge, had already been decided. Your division won't be impacted, David reassured me, his confidence deepening my unease. Day-to-day operations will persist as they are. However, I was tempted to ask who would take the lead, but a look in my mother's eyes made me hesitate. This wasn't the appropriate moment for conflict, given her sorrow still so fresh. The integration of the acquisition demands close monitoring, I said instead. My team anticipates guidance on the following steps. The executive committee can manage any immediate matters. Decisions, David answered calmly. After tomorrow, we can talk about longer-term arrangements. Essentially, he already knew what tomorrow's findings would disclose, granting him the power to make such assurances. That night, I found myself unable to sleep in the impeccably preserved room that used to be my childhood bedroom. Instead, I ventured downstairs for some tea. The house was quiet with most of the lights off, but a gentle light emanated from beneath my father's study door. I hadn't intended to listen in, but my name halted me abruptly. Tomorrow, Olivia will be taken aback, David said, his voice low yet fervent. I recognized the rhythm of him pacing. 3 steps, pause, turn, repeat. A habit from childhood, when he was strategizing. In response to David's words, my mother's voice, too soft for me to comprehend, echoed back. Now it's too late to alter anything, David went on. Dad has made his decision, and the lawyers claim it's unassailable. Bennett Media Group will be transferred to me, not just the East Coast operations. She will receive the profit sharing we discussed, but no controlling interest. Again, a soft response from my mother. She'll certainly be displeased. Throughout her career, she had envisioned herself as a potential co-leader of the company one day. However, her father clarified that the business required unified leadership rather than a bi-coastal division that might ultimately lead to its destruction. This revelation left me reeling, my hands trembling, forgetting the tea. The harsh clarity of what I'd heard left no room for ambiguity. My father, who had sent me to California to revive our struggling West Coast division, who had praised every milestone of its recovery, who had regularly discussed strategy and future plans with me, offered only profit sharing in return. No leadership position, no controlling stake, no acknowledgement of 6 years spent working 70 hours a week and sacrificing personal relationships. As I returned to my room, a sense of tranquility replaced my initial shock. Was I truly taken aback? Hadn't there been indications? The board meetings where my innovative ideas encountered traditional resistance, my father's refusal to establish a succession plan despite my subtle hints, his consistent commendations of my operational achievements, accompanied by suggestions that my innovative methods might be too avant-garde for our primary demographic, left me pondering an uncertain future. The shadows on the walls danced unpredictably, mirroring my own apprehension. Tomorrow, I resolved, I would initiate a search for executive roles beyond the family enterprise. Regardless of what transpired next, I couldn't stay at Bennett Media Group, watching my brother erode the modernization plan I had advocated. Unbeknownst to me then, the true epiphany I was about to encounter wasn't related to wealth, media empires, or executive leadership. It lay concealed in my father's private study, within a locked drawer he believed no one would ever access. A new day dawned. Sunlight streamed through the guest room drapes, rousing me from restless sleep filled with dreams about meetings where I found myself mute. Impulsively, I grabbed my phone to scan emails from my Californian team. A series of pressing matters required immediate attention: integration issues, personnel queries, decisions that needed swift resolution. I responded methodically, keeping silence on the forthcoming leadership shift since I lacked any concrete details yet. I donned a sober charcoal gray suit, having worn it in numerous tough talks with resistant financiers. If my status was to be compromised, I resolved to do so with grace. The house was peaceful as I walked downstairs. My mother was solitary at the kitchen island, a now cold cup of tea beside her. She was scrutinizing what seemed like funeral seating plans through her glasses, which she subsequently removed. "You're an early riser," she observed. "Would you care for coffee? I could ask Maria to prepare some." "I can handle it myself," I responded, heading towards the intricate espresso machine my father had imported from Italy. Much of my earliest memories revolved around observing him meticulously operating it each morning. I derived a sense of solace in continuing this ritual now. The car will arrive at 9 to transport us to Richard's office. My mother mentioned Richard Anderson, our family attorney, who has handled my father's personal and professional matters for 3 decades. "Is David coming separately?" I queried, noticing his absence. "He had a prior meeting with the board chairman," she answered, avoiding eye contact. "He will join us at Richard's office." "A board meeting before the reading of the will?" It appeared so. Try to conceal any tension in my voice. "It seems premature," my mother sighed, finally looking me in the eyes. "Olivia, your father made his decisions thoughtfully, always considering the company's welfare. The suggestion of a board meeting before the will reading seems unnecessary. Whatever we're set to learn today," I cut in, placing my coffee cup a bit too forcefully on the table, thanks to David. She didn't feign confusion. She knew I had eavesdropped. "You picked up enough," was her response. "I discovered I've been excluded from significant decision-making at the company I helped establish. Was Dad behind this? Or was it David who persuaded him while I was thousands of miles away overseeing our West Coast operations?" "That's unjust," my mother whispered softly. "Your father greatly appreciated your efforts, but he didn't think enough of them to grant me leadership responsibilities. It wasn't about trust, Olivia. It was about Dad's vision for the company's future direction. David has been collaborating closely with the board, East Coast advertisers, and political connections safeguarding our broadcasting licenses," she continued. "My father considered a centralized leadership structure as more powerful than shared authority, you imply. Yet, my accomplishments in establishing our digital division, updating our revenue strategy, and securing our longevity seem to hold no value." My mother reached out to me, but I withdrew, not prepared for reconciliation. Those achievements mattered significantly. They're symbolized by the profit-sharing agreement. "Profit sharing," I muttered disdainfully, sounding more like an employee than a partner. The car arrived before she could react, halting a conversation that was going nowhere fruitful. We rode to Richard Anderson's office in silence, each engrossed in personal contemplations. The upper floor of the distinguished Georgetown building housed Anderson and his associates, their long-standing expertise in managing affluent families' intricate legal matters evident in the refined luxury of the reception area. Richard himself welcomed us, his height and silver hair adding to the dignity fitting for his position. He had known me since our childhood years, managed my first real estate purchase, my divorce 3 years back, and numerous business affairs in between. "Olivia," he firmly gripped my hands with his, sincerity reflected in his eyes. "I'm glad to see you, even under these circumstances. Your father frequently mentioned your achievements in California with great pride." The mere mention of his pride in me struck a deeper chord than it should have. David was already seated in the conference room, joined by Jennifer and 2 junior associates from Richard's firm, who would serve as witnesses. Customary courtesies were exchanged, sympathies offered and declined. Then Richard unfurled the thick leather portfolio containing my father's final instructions, marking the start of the official proceedings. The initial provisions were as expected and unremarkable. My mother was granted the family home, the vacation property in Maine, and sizable investment accounts to maintain her lifestyle comfortably. Multiple charitable donations and smaller presents to long-serving employees were mentioned, followed by corporate matters. As expected, David was designated as CEO and majority shareholder of Bennett Media Group. My position as director of the West Coast Division remained, subject to the CEO's decision, along with a 15% minority stake and suitable profit participation. The formal announcement hit me like a physical impact. Not only had I been passed over for leading the company I helped reshape, but my continued leadership, even within my own division, now hinged on my brother's discretion. Richard inquired if we had any questions. I posed just one, catching myself off guard with the calmness of my voice. Was there a reason behind this specific allocation of company assets? Richard adjusted his glasses and replied, "After the official reading, you were each to receive a private letter from your father as per his instructions." This was not something David had discussed with him. Upon the conclusion of the reading and the junior associates witnessing our signatures on various documents, Richard asked us to wait while he fetched the letters from his private safe. My mother and Jennifer left for coffee in the reception area, leaving David and me alone in an awkward silence. "I realize this isn't what you anticipated," he eventually said. "I understand," I responded tersely. "There's nothing you can say to make this feel any less like a betrayal." "Betrayal?" He seemed genuinely taken aback. "Your father made a business decision regarding the future of the company, as 70% of our traditional revenue comes from East Coast operations. The West Coast Digital Division accounts for 85% of our expansion and long-term viability," I retorted. "Yet it's not solely about corporate figures, is it? It seems to be more about who spent the past 6 years at headquarters, socializing in the right circles, playing golf with the board, while I was innovating elsewhere." "That's not fair," he started. But Richard's response prevented further explanations. Richard distributed a sealed envelope to each of us, all bearing our father's distinctive handwriting. "Your father wanted you to read these in private," he clarified. "I will assign you separate conference rooms." The junior associate guided me to a smaller meeting room, leaving me alone with the envelope that was meant to reveal why my father had overlooked years of his training for me. "My dear leadership," I said, my hand slightly shaking as I opened the seal. "My darling Olivia, should you be reading this, it means our shared time has abruptly ended, and I've fallen short in delaying a crucial discussion for far too long. To begin, I must seek your forgiveness for this lapse. It appears to you that my decision to appoint David as my successor at Bennett Media Group undermines your remarkable abilities and leadership promise. This is far from the truth. Unbeknownst to everyone except Richard, over the past 2 years, I've been discreetly examining significant financial irregularities within our East Coast operations. There exists an individual at a high level in our company who has been stealthily redirecting advertising revenue, altering financial records, and undermining our journalistic ethics through concealed agreements with political entities. The evidence suggests a web of corruption involving multiple board members, high-ranking executives, and potentially regulatory officials in charge of our broadcasting licenses. If exposed, such corruption could be disastrous for Bennett Media Group, not just financially, but also legally, risking criminal charges and the demolition of all we've accomplished. I assigned you to California, not only to rejuvenate our troubled ventures there, but also to shield you from this escalating crisis. Your achievements surpassed my highest hopes, yet they simultaneously validated what I already understood. You are the true successor of this company, with the foresight and morality needed to guide it through impending difficulties. The statement you heard today is not the entire document. A codicil, known only to Richard, comes into effect 60 days after my demise. You will assume the position of the controlling shareholder and chairman at Bennett Media Group, empowered to conduct investigations and make necessary changes. The reason for such a complex deception is that those involved in corruption likely think they have prevailed. They believe they can manipulate and control David, who has been kept largely separate from financial operations within the company. For the next 2 months, it's crucial to maintain appearances as if nothing has altered. This will give you enough time to collect irrefutable evidence before it can be eliminated. I've arranged for a private investigator's complete files to be given to you in my study safe, the combination of which is your birthday, followed by your mother's. Additionally, you will receive Richard's additional documentation and a secure phone containing contact details for federal authorities with whom I have cautiously built relationships. I couldn't disclose this information while I was alive due to the risk it posed to your safety. I couldn't reveal it to your mother or David since their responses might have tipped off those involved. Richard is aware only of a codicil. He doesn't know the specifics of what I've uncovered. You are not my backup, Olivia. Instead, you are my first choice for ensuring the company's future. The upcoming 60 days will demand every ounce of strategic acumen and courage you've shown throughout your career. Don't trust anyone fully until you know who's involved. This includes the board, our executives, not even David. I'm deeply sorry for burdening you with this, but I believe no one else is as capable as you are to carry it. With unwavering faith in you, Dad. I sat there, the letter quivering in my hands. My mind whirled to comprehend its implications. The betrayal I'd felt a moment ago morphed into a mix of emotions. Validation that my father had valued me as I'd hoped, terror over what he'd discovered, an overwhelming worry about the responsibility now resting solely on my shoulders. The business wasn't being seized from me, it was being entrusted to me in a profound manner. Initially, I had to act the part of the disheartened daughter and the marginalized executive, all the while covertly preparing for a corporate battle. I carefully folded the letter and tucked it into my jacket pocket, internally deciding to keep my responses under control. The person observing me leave the room should perceive only a woman grappling with professional disillusionment, not someone who had just uncovered a suspected conspiracy within her family enterprise. Upon my return to the main conference room, David was already present, his face unyielding. Had his letter held the same disclosures, or was he being left in the dark for his safety and to uphold the facade? "Are you all right?" my mother inquired, scrutinizing my face with worry. "I'll be fine," I responded, the ambiguity of the response serving me well. This revealed his intentions. Despite our potential disagreements, I acknowledge his judgment as being in the best interest of the company. David appeared noticeably relaxed, probably anticipating a more challenging response. He suggested, "Let's collaborate during this transition." His insight into digital operations continues to be indispensable, I conceded with an uneasy calmness. The company's prosperity has always been my foremost concern. Richard observed our conversation silently, like someone privy to more than he could disclose. He then brought up the need for each of us to sign additional documents, redirecting the discussion towards logistics, authority transfers, banking authorizations, and so on. The rest of the meeting was a haze of signatures and legal jargon. Meanwhile, my mind was preoccupied, already organizing known facts, identifying what I needed to grasp, and strategizing for the turbulent 60 days ahead. Before departing, Richard requested I linger momentarily to address certain California business matters. David seemed uneasy about this private discussion, but eventually followed our mother after Richard promised it was solely for procedural purposes. Once the door closed, Richard subtly changed his formal tone. "I can't discuss the contents of your father's letter," he said softly, "but I want you to understand that should any instructions he left you require legal assistance, I am at your disposal." I thanked him carefully. "Did my father leave anything else for me? Any further materials?" Richard barely moved his head in confirmation. "A package will be brought to your hotel room this afternoon. The courier has been told to deliver it directly to you after verifying your identity." "My hotel room? I'm temporarily residing at my mother's residence. My father instructed me to vacate a hotel following our meeting," Richard clarified. He booked a suite at Four Seasons using the name Olivia Carter, as shown in this envelope containing the reservation confirmation. The precision of my father's planning left me both astounded and uneasy. He had foreseen every eventuality, even arranging for me to have a separate workspace away from our family home. "Is there anything else I should be aware of?" I inquired. Richard pondered before responding. "Your father was an exceptional strategist, deeply passionate about this company and his loved ones. He believed whatever course he initiated was the best possible one. As for you, what do you think?" "I am convinced William Bennett selected the appropriate individual to tackle the upcoming task." He extended his hand formally. "Good luck, Olivia." Exiting the law office, my mind whirled, every movement scrutinized by potential eyes. The town car driver, the receptionist, and even my mother, who watched me with worry as we rode home in silence. Finally, breaking the silence, she commented on how well I seemed to be handling things. "What other option do I have?" was my response, a semi-truth rolling off my tongue easily. "The decision has been made." My mother insisted that my father greatly appreciated my contributions. "The profit-sharing agreement is very generous." I gave a non-committal nod, questioning the extent of her knowledge about the financial discrepancies. Was she entirely unaware, or did her acceptance of the will's terms stem from fear of what might be exposed? "I mentioned I might stay at a hotel tonight as we arrived," I commented casually. "Wanted some personal space to prepare for the funeral tomorrow." She seemed taken aback, but didn't argue. "Of course, if that suits you better. You know this place is always open to you." "I get it, though. I need time by myself to ponder the upcoming decisions." I was being somewhat evasive. "I'll have to contact my team in California regarding this development and its impact on our operations." In truth, I was hastily packing, taking only essentials for a few days, As I closed my bag, I contemplated checking my father's safe before departure. The risk seemed too high. If found in his study, suspicions would be raised. It was better to wait until I had a clearer understanding of the situation at hand. Instead, I summoned a rideshare service, opting for an additional layer of privacy over using the family driver to avoid being traced. At the Four Seasons, using the name Olivia Carter, I checked in, utilizing the confirmation given by Richard. The reception staff displayed no signs of recognition for the mismatch between my identification and the reservation name, hinting that my father had even arranged this detail. My suite was on the top floor, offering views of the Potomac and boasting advanced security measures like keycard access to the floor, multiple locks on the door, and a high-tech safe in the wardrobe. My father's choice proved astute. Exactly at 3 p.m., there was a knock on the door. Through the peephole, I saw a courier with a professional demeanor holding a package and a digital signature pad. After verifying his credentials and confirming that he was looking for Olivia Carter, I received the package, which was a briefcase sealed with a combination lock. The attached note contained only a 6-digit number, my mother's birthday. The briefcase contained damaging documents revealing inconsistencies in advertising revenue reporting, emails about regulatory discussions among board members, and worst of all, proof that our news division suppressed multiple significant investigative pieces due to political pressure exerted by figures linked to Thomas Harrington, our chairman of the board. Additionally, a separate USB drive held the entirety of the private investigator's files, consisting of surveillance images, recorded conversations, and background checks on high-ranking executives. The portrait that emerged was disastrous. A faction of Bennett Media Group's management essentially transformed parts of our news operations into extortion rings, offering favorable coverage in exchange for regulatory leniency while embezzling millions from advertising revenues through offshore corporations. Marcus Reynolds, our financial chief and my father's trusted confidant for 2 decades, was at the heart of it all. He was David's mentor since he joined the company and would have almost full financial control if David became CEO. As per my father's letter, a secure phone held just 3 contacts named Federal 1, Federal 2, and PI. A note detailed that Federal 1 was an FBI agent specializing in corporate crime, Federal 2 belonged to the FCC's Enforcement Division, and PI represented the private investigator my father had hired. All 3 were thoroughly vetted for integrity and absence of any ties to Bennett Media Group. I spent hours mapping out the corruption network using the materials provided, transforming my hotel room into a movie detective scene with documents scattered everywhere, notes on stationery, and connections traced on the bathroom mirror with a washable marker by midnight. The situation was more dire than suggested by my father's letter, revealing not merely financial deceit, but a profound corruption of the core ethos of our company. Our revered news division had morphed into an instrument for political manipulation, while the advertising sector served as a conduit for money laundering. Even our philanthropic programs were exploited to exert pressure on local officials in areas where we operated. The most disquieting aspect was the indication of the conspiracy's speeded-up trajectory. Records from the private detective uncovered suspicious financial activities preceding my father's stroke, rapid transfers to offshore accounts, sudden meetings between board members and regulatory bodies, and a spike in deleted emails from crucial executives' inboxes. Was it somehow them who triggered my father's stroke? The notion left me shuddering. The medical professional found no signs of foul play. Yet if these individuals were prepared to manipulate an entire corporation for financial gain, what else could they potentially do? At around 2 in the morning, sleepless and restless, I dialed the number labeled PI on my secure phone. "Ms. Bennett," a rough voice replied promptly. "I've been anticipating your call. You recognize who this is?" I queried, taken aback. "You and my father collaborated closely for the past 18 months. I am well acquainted with you. Michael Reeves, private investigator." Did my father consider his stroke might have been unnatural? I inquired directly. After a brief pause, he voiced worries about his safety, indeed. Following his commencement of gathering substantial evidence against Reynolds and Harrington, he took extensive security measures. No definitive proof that they would go to such extremes. But yet, he didn't dismiss the possibility, I concluded. The timing was undoubtedly beneficial for them. A shift in the succession plan was imminent. Your father had prepared documents to oust Reynolds and restructure the board. This was recently discovered information. When would this occur? The board meeting was set for next month. He wanted concrete proof before taking action. I understood this. The sequence of events becoming clearer, suggesting they might have been aware he was onto them. It could be possible. Your father was cautious, but Reynolds has influence throughout the company. That's why the Codicil strategy was crucial, making them think they had triumphed while planning the counterattack. I now have 60 days before the Codicil takes effect, I remarked. What do we do until then? We gather more proof, create a watertight case, and identify everyone involved. Once the Codicil is activated and you take control, we'll have one opportunity to clean up before they can retaliate. And David, my brother, is he part of this? Another moment of silence. Your father doubted it. You believed David was being exploited due to his lack of financial expertise, as he was appointed CEO of the figurehead specifically to hide their wrongdoings. This matched my own observation. David has always excelled in content and public relations aspects of our business, while leaving the financial details to others. His talents lay in programming decisions and personnel management, rather than forensic accounting. I need to retrieve documents from my father's home safe, I stated. He cautioned against it due to additional documentation being there. It's too risky at this moment, Reeves argued. This incident most likely points to someone within your family's household staff. Your sudden interest in your father's study would arouse suspicion. So, what's the next step? Exactly as they anticipate, the disheartened daughter accepting her limited role. Return to California. Ensure normal business operations. Give an impression of focusing on your division rather than company-wide issues. All the while, we continue gathering evidence covertly. The plan seemed logical, but it felt inactive when every instinct urged swift action, allowing them to carry on with their corruption of the company my grandfather established, letting them potentially escape justice. I couldn't complete the thought myself. Not escaping justice, Reeves told me. Your father set up a fail-safe mechanism. If the Codicil isn't activated as planned, if anything happens to you, for example, everything we've collected will automatically go to federal authorities and certain journalists. They believe they've won the first battle. Let them think that while we prepare to win the war. After ending the call, I stood at the window looking out over the city lights. My father's company buildings in the distance. The Bennett Media Group emblem shone brightly in the night sky. A legacy spanning 3 generations, now tainted from within. The funeral was scheduled for tomorrow. I'd find myself confronted with board members, executives, and family acquaintances who'd extend sympathies, some knowing they profited from my father's demise. By my brother's side, he'd be acclaimed as our company's new leader, unwittingly used in their game. For the ensuing 60 days, I'd need to embody multiple roles: supportive sister, committed division head, professional accepting defeat with poise, all while covertly constructing evidence to reveal corruption and reclaim Dad's business. My mind dwelt on his letter, his faith in me, the precision of his preparations as he sensed his life could be at risk. William Bennett was a shrewd businessman. His last strategic gambit, though, surpassed all expectations, temporarily sacrificing his own stature to ensure our company's ultimate survival. The burden of accountability descended upon me. It wasn't merely for the corporation or my father's legacy, but for every employee relying on Bennett Media Group for their livelihood, every community we served through our broadcasts, and each tenet of journalistic honesty we professed. The day dawned prematurely, a dim light seeping through unfastened hotel drapes. I went through the motions of washing up and dressing, donning a somber black dress for the funeral. Yesterday's documents were stowed away in the hotel safe. I dared not carry them to an occasion where so many individuals under scrutiny might gather. The funeral service was taking place at Washington National Cathedral, symbolizing my father's influence within the community. Upon arrival, the extent of attendance became evident. Hordes of mourners flowing into the venerable edifice. Media executives, politicians, celebrities whose careers flourished under our networks. My mother and David stood with Jennifer at the entrance, accepting sympathies from a continuous flow of guests. I joined them, smoothly transitioning into my grieving role. Perhaps it was because the sorrow, indeed, was entirely authentic. "You seem exhausted," my mother whispered to me as I positioned myself next to her. "Did you sleep at all?" I responded honestly, "Not much. Too many thoughts." She empathetically squeezed my hand, inferring, "Your sleeplessness wasn't due to the uncovering of a corporate conspiracy, but rather from disappointment." The board chairman, Thomas Harrington, advanced with his usual solemnity. At 65, he conveyed the distinguished weight of traditional media. With silver hair, bespoke attire, and the self-assured posture of one familiar with power, according to my father's documents, He had manipulated the suppression of three significant investigative reports that could have disclosed corruption in agencies responsible for our broadcasting permits. Catherine, David, Olivia, he greeted us, grabbing my mother's hands. The demise of William is deeply affecting us all. To me, he was not just a business associate, but a cherished friend. I mustered the strength to accept his hug, fighting back the disgust that nearly surfaced on my face. This man had betrayed everything my father believed in, possibly even played a part in his death, and now stood before us, proclaiming friendship. "Thank you for joining us, Thomas," I said. "My father always respected your counsel on the board." His gaze appraised me momentarily, perhaps searching for any hidden knowledge. "William frequently spoke of your achievements in California. It's a pity you couldn't relocate those skills more permanently to the east." The veiled insult was delivered so subtly no one else would have noticed. A hint at my supposedly diminished standing. A claim of the victory he thought he'd won. The West Coast Division required strong leadership. I responded with calculated humility. Harrington acknowledged that he grasped the situation more than anyone else. He gave a nod, suggesting he was content with my apparent surrender. "It's likely we'll discuss succession plans for your department soon, possibly during the early part of next week, once we've addressed immediate concerns. Of course, whatever benefits the company is suitable." As Harrington conversed privately with David, Marcus Reynolds drew near. As CFO, Reynolds was my father's right-hand man for financial matters. However, based on the evidence, he was also the orchestrator of the financial fraud schemes that had drained millions from the company. "I'm really sorry, Olivia," he said. His regret seemed sincere. Reynolds, in his mid-50s, maintained a lean athlete's physique and bore the sharp-eyed gaze of someone perpetually crunching numbers. "Your father was extremely proud of what you established in California." "Thank you, Marcus." I held his gaze, scanning for any signs of the deceit exposed in the documents. "Almost done with your quarterly projections. Expect them by Monday. No rush," he said, urging me to spend time with family. "Work helps," was my response, implying focus. A hint of approval, maybe, crossed his face, acknowledging my devotion towards my specific job rather than broader company matters. "Indeed, you remind me of William's daughter in this aspect." The service combined solemnity and genuine emotions. Colleagues recounted stories about my father's visionary guidance and compassionate nature. A senator spoke of his influence on media policy and journalistic ethics. David delivered a heartfelt eulogy, highlighting our father's legacy, his voice cracking when discussing the future William would miss. I found myself watching the ceremony with a peculiar feeling, like an observer at a rehearsed play, where everyone knew their lines, but only I knew the secret beneath the script. How many people in this cathedral were involved in corrupting my father's business? How many appeared genuinely grieving for the man they admired? During the service, I couldn't help but scrutinize the mourners, matching faces with names from the files I had reviewed. The vice president of advertising who helped establish shell companies to embezzle funds, the news director who silenced investigative stories on order, and the board members who approved suspicious financial reports without objection. They all solemnly nodded at the right moments, wiped away tears, and exchanged sorrowful glances. A picture of corporate grief at its finest. Following the service, a smaller reception took place at my parents' residence. As family members and close friends congregated in the living room, I found myself briefly alone in the kitchen, replenishing a water glass. "Your composure is commendable," said Richard Anderson, my father's lawyer, studying me intently. "Practice brings perfection," I whispered. 6 years of California corporate diplomacy had readied me for maintaining a facade. He glanced around to make sure we weren't overheard. "Have you looked through the documents?" I nodded. "Yes." "And," I continued, "I can see why my father's strategy is crucial, but I wish for a quicker response." Richard slightly nodded in agreement. "Impatience has always been your weakness, even as a child. My father used to say you shared that trait with him, always thinking ahead and growing impatient when others couldn't keep up." "Did he share the full extent of his discoveries with you?" I asked in a low voice. "He didn't reveal specifics to protect me as much as anyone, but my experience handling the company's legal matters has given me my suspicions." He fell silent. The timing of the codicil wasn't coincidental. 60 days allows for submission of certain quarterly financial reports, crucial pieces of evidence. This data was invaluable. First quarter reporting. Richard confirmed exactly 57 days from now. After these reports are submitted to the SEC, amending earlier records becomes challenging without setting off automatic alerts. Our discussion was disrupted by David's entry into the kitchen, his face indicating he overheard part of our conversation. "What reports are you talking about?" he inquired. Hinting of a cautious tone, Richard quickly regained composure, smoothly responding. "Simply discussing with Olivia standard legal procedures following your father's estate settlement, SEC notifications, regulatory disclosures, none urgent matters." David seemed content with this explanation, then addressed me. "Several board members wish to meet with you before your return to California," he stated. "Is tomorrow at 9 suitable for us? We convene at headquarters for an informal handover meeting, providing a chance to assess who knows what and their perception of me." David left after giving me a cautionary glance, suggesting I tread carefully the next day and listen more than speak. I promised him I always would. The rest of the gathering passed in a haze of sympathies and tactfully phrased discussions. By nightfall, as the last guest departed, I felt the weight of the funeral's emotional toll and my efforts to maintain my composure threatening to overpower me. My mother questioned if I was staying at this place tonight, and I mentioned my early morning calls with the California team. I clarified it would be more convenient from the hotel, considering the time difference, as I didn't want to disturb the family by waking them. Though she nodded, sadness seemed evident in her eyes. "Do you plan to join us for dinner tomorrow evening?" "It's just the family." "I will make it," I pledged, giving her a hug. "Take care, Mom. Today was tough for all of us." Afterward, at the hotel, I received a message from Michael Reeves, the private detective, asking for an immediate meeting. 20 minutes later, he showed up at my suite, which took me aback as I'd anticipated a phone call instead of an in-person visit. Contrary to my expectations based on our phone conversations, Reeves was not the typical noir detective. In his mid-50s, he had an unremarkable appearance suited for blending into corporate settings. Medium height, medium build, graying temples, and a forgettable navy suit from any department store. Apologizing for the unplanned visit, he said this after I confirmed his identity and allowed him entry. "After observing the funeral, I felt it was urgent to inform you immediately." "What's the matter?" He set a signal disruptor on the coffee table and turned it on. "This device blocks any potential eavesdropping devices. Although it may seem excessive, your father always requested such precautions during our meetings. Before tomorrow's board meeting, there are 3 crucial points you need to know. First, Marcus Reynolds had a private meeting with Thomas Harrington directly following the funeral that lasted nearly 40 minutes inside Harrington's car. I couldn't overhear their conversation, but their body language indicated disagreement. It seemed like Harrington was giving Reynolds orders that made him uneasy. Perhaps their alliance wasn't as strong as it appeared in the documents. Secondly, David was separately approached by both men within an hour of that meeting. Once more, I didn't catch what was said, but he seemed puzzled following his conversation with Reynolds, then reassured after chatting with Harrington. I assumed their actions were coaching him, readying him for the upcoming meeting, ensuring he speaks according to their wishes. This leads me to the third and most worrying update. Financial records are being transferred or manipulated. Your father had installed a tracking software on the company's accounting servers before his stroke. It has been flagging suspicious activity for the past 12 hours. Large exports of historical data, changes in modification timestamps on annual reports from previous years, and alterations in user credentials. They are concealing their actions, I stated. The implications: becoming apparent. Removing evidence before the quarterly filings. Exactly. Whatever they're planning, they're expediting the timeline. The meeting tomorrow isn't just a symbolic transition. It appears to be a part of something more significant. They seem determined to either close down entirely or seize direct financial control over the California branch, stripping it of its autonomy. This move would grant them access to all our independent accounting systems, client relations, and everything my father deliberately kept separate from East Coast operations, essentially removing the last hurdle to absolute command over the company's finances. Reeves confirmed this. The California team is the only major department that hasn't come under Reynolds' financial supervision so far. "What can we do about it?" I inquired, my thoughts racing for solutions. "If we wait for the Codicil to take effect in 60 days, there might be no company left to salvage," Reeves warned thoughtfully. "Your father foresaw such a move after his demise. That's why he gave you the override authority." "Override authority? What is that?" He appeared taken aback. "It wasn't in the documentation. A letter should have been provided detailing that Richard Anderson could instantaneously activate a codicil under emergency conditions. Granted your approval." I shook my head, finding no mention of an override. The text only outlined the 60-day timeline and the evidence files. Reeves furrowed his brow, expressing concern. "This is troubling," he said. "Either your father altered his plans without informing me, or a portion of what he meant for me to receive was intercepted. I concluded, feeling a shiver run down my spine. Examine. The hotel's safe, he advised. Ensure everything remains as you left it. I approached the closet containing the safe, punched in the code, and opened it. The briefcase and documents appeared untouched. However, as I sifted through the stack of papers, I detected an anomaly. The hotel notepad beneath them, which I'd been using for notes, was arranged perfectly instead of at the slight angle I recalled leaving it. Someone has been inside here, I whispered. Everything seems familiar, but it's excessively neat, suggesting deliberate restoration instead of natural preservation. Reeves promptly inspected the room methodically, peering beneath furniture, scrutinizing light fittings, trailing his fingers along window ledges. Near the desk, he halted, meticulously dislodging a minuscule gadget attached to the lamp base's underside. Listening device, he confirmed, presenting the nearly concealed bug. Top-notch quality. Continuing in silence, he carried on his search, eventually discovering two additional devices, one near the bed and another by the entrance door. Instead of extracting them, he opted to leave them, motioning for me to follow him into the bathroom. He activated the shower before speaking, the running water offering concealment for our discussion. The hotel security has been infiltrated, he said softly. We need to shift your location urgently. Do you have a local acquaintance where you can stay temporarily? In need of someone unrelated to the company or family? I pondered. My college roommate resides in Georgetown. Our bond intact, but she's never been linked to Bennett Media. Ideal. Contact her from the hotel phone for continuity and accommodations. Gather a minimal bag with necessities. I'll concoct a distraction, allowing your exit through the service area undetected. 20 minutes hence, I was in a cab en route to Georgetown, having left my major luggage in the hotel room with the lights on and television running. Reeves had caused a minor plumbing predicament in a room adjacent, diverting security and maintenance personnel from the service elevator for my escape. Andrea Gonzalez, my ex-roommate from Northwestern, welcomed me with astonishment yet instant warmth upon my arrival at her brownstone townhouse. Now a human rights lawyer unrelated to the media sector, she might well be the ideal refuge. Are you suggesting corporate espionage? Incredulous after my condensed account about requiring lodging due to business complications following my father's demise, that appears excessively severe, even for media corporations. Succession strategies can bring out the most unfavorable traits. I vaguely answered her concerns. It's merely a temporary solution until matters stabilize. Mi casa es su casa, she echoed with the same benevolent disposition from our college years. The guest room is at your disposal for as long as needed. Once settled in her spare quarters, I utilized a secure line to contact Richard Anderson, detailing the hotel incident and inquiring about the override option Reeves had mentioned. Indeed, he confirmed its existence, his tone somber. William left a sealed missive with explicit instructions for me to share that information only in person, not within the initial document bundle. Why wouldn't he incorporate it in his letter to me? He expressed worry over the apparent event being interception. The letter lacked crucial details, keeping the sensitive matters for oral communication exclusively. So, is there an override available? You can enforce the addendum promptly if required? Yes, but the criteria are stringent. Your father set imminent and irreversible harm to the company as the benchmark. He was cautious about acting prematurely before gathering enough proof. They're manipulating financial documents, I informed him. And it appears that tomorrow's board meeting aims to put the California division directly under Reynolds's financial supervision. Richard pondered for a moment. That's troubling, but not necessarily reaching the required standard. If they're tampering with records, such actions actually generate fresh evidence of their misconduct. Digital forensics can uncover those alterations. And if they fully take control of the California operations, should I dismantle the individual financial tracking systems my father set up? He admitted it would be a significant step. Let's wait for the outcome of tomorrow's meeting before taking any definitive actions. Attend as scheduled, gather information, but do not make any promises about California's operations. Any substantial changes need formal board approval, not just an executive order. If they push for immediate alterations, delay. Ask for time to smoothly transition your team. Demand written formal procedures. Corporate bureaucracy can be beneficial when you want to slow things down. After the call ended, I spent hours re-examining the evidence files, searching for anything overlooked that could assist in navigating tomorrow's meeting. Around 2 a.m., something stood out. A pattern in the modified financial reports that might offer leverage. The fraudulent activities weren't solely aimed at personal wealth accumulation. They were intended to inflate the value of Bennett Media Groups for potential sale. Indirect mentions in board minutes suggested strategic partnership possibilities and optimizations in capital structure, corporate jargon for selling the company. This explained the sense of urgency. They weren't merely concealing past fraud, they were planning a complete exit. If Bennett Media Group was sold to a larger conglomerate, the new owners would uncover financial inconsistencies eventually. However, by then, the current leadership would have pocketed millions from the sale proceeds. It appears that my father found out about these plans and recognized them as the ultimate betrayal of his legacy. For William Bennett, Bennett Media Group wasn't just a business. It was a multi-generational commitment to journalism and community service. Selling it to the highest bidder would have contravened everything he had established. Equipped with this understanding, I eventually drifted off to sleep for a while before readying myself for the board meeting. I selected my attire deliberately, a conservative navy suit that conveyed professionalism without appearing menacing. The objective was to be underestimated, to make them think I had accepted my diminished role and was solely concentrating on safeguarding my small piece of the company. Andrea let me borrow her car instead of calling a taxi, an extra measure for avoiding surveillance. On my way to Bennett Media Group headquarters, the familiar glass skyscraper in downtown DC where I started my career before the California assignment, I ran through various possibilities for the impending meeting. The executive floor, as expected, was adorned with plush carpeting, wood-paneled walls displaying journalism accolades and historic headlines, the quiet ambiance of power and history. The receptionist, familiar with me from childhood visits to my father's office, appeared unsure about how to greet me. Had I remained in executive leadership, or had I been reduced to middle management due to the stipulations of the will? In the end, she opted for a professionally neutral greeting. Ms. Bennett was the message. Upon my arrival, Mr. Harrington requested that I join the board meeting taking place in Conference Room A immediately. Responding with a cordial and familiar, "Thank you, Diane," I headed toward the conference room. As I neared it, I could see through the transparent walls that most of the board had already gathered. David occupied my father's previous seat at the head of the table, looking uneasy about the symbolic positioning. Thomas Harrington conversed intently with Marcus Reynolds nearby. The remaining 3 board members, flagged in my father's files as either complicit or compromised, huddled together over papers. Taking a deep breath, I prepared myself before stepping in. The instant the door creaked open, chatter halted as gazes fell upon me. "Olivia," Harrington greeted with a practiced air of politeness. "I'm grateful for your presence at this challenging juncture. Please, have a seat." I observed he pointed to a chair at the distant end of the table, subtly signifying his power play. Instead, I chose the vacant chair opposite David. "I prefer this spot if it's all right with everyone. It facilitates conversation." A brief flash of irritation flitted across Harrington's face before he donned a smile. "Certainly." As I settled down, I locked eyes with David, attempting to decipher his mental condition. His usual confidence was absent, replaced by guarded unease. Was he starting to perceive the manipulation? Harrington emphasized that the change for the Bennett family is challenging, given William's long-standing role as the company's foundation. Everyone acknowledged the dual personal and professional loss felt by David and Olivia. Moments of respect paid, business proceedings followed. Harrington then steered the discussion, noting that William would expect us to secure the company's ongoing success and stability. This is the reason for today's gathering: formalizing leadership transition and tackling immediate operational concerns. Marcus Reynolds passed out folders to everyone present. We have developed a thorough transition strategy ensuring operational continuity alongside necessary structural modifications. Upon scrutinizing the file, I found what Reeves had anticipated: a complete integration scheme for the California Division's financial and operational framework with headquarters, thereby erasing the autonomy my father deliberately set up. Reynolds explained, referring to page 3, "We suggest a simplified reporting system that concentrates all financial functions at headquarters, thus minimizing duplication and enhancing uniform supervision across divisions." I studied the paper closely, observing how the seemingly harmless corporate jargon concealed its true objective: to centralize the company's finances under Reynolds' immediate authority before the quarterly reports. The strategy was designed to seem like routine operational enhancement, instead of the eradication of independent financial audit. I expressed doubts about the execution schedule. 6 weeks appears exceptionally swift for synchronizing systems intentionally built to function autonomously, I stated, maintaining a neutral tone. Is such speed realistic? Reynolds offered a thin smile. The autonomous systems have become an inefficiency we can no longer tolerate in our current competitive media environment. The expedited timeline guarantees immediate operational cost savings. And what are these savings expected to amount to? I inquired, feigning ignorance. I don't see any financial forecasts in the documents. Reynolds looked toward Harrington before responding. We anticipate approximately $3.2 million in reduced administrative costs annually, mainly by eliminating redundant roles and procedures. That's intriguing, I responded. Annually spending $1.8 million on administrative costs for separate systems, as suggested in the latest efficiency report, caused a brief tension in the room. Board members uninvolved in the conspiracy exchanged puzzled glances. Reynolds calmly argued, those figures fail to account for all pertinent expenses, indirect costs, opportunity costs, and integration. Inefficiencies significantly inflate the total. I proposed, it would be helpful if we could review those calculations for thoroughness' sake. Harrington intervened, aiming to steer clear of this challenging line of questioning. We can definitely offer a more comprehensive analysis. However, he emphasized, the strategic benefits surpass mere cost savings. The conversation then shifted towards my brother, David, who seemed taken aback. He hesitated before responding. He cautiously stated, I see value in streamlining our operations, but I'm mindful that our California division has thrived with its existing setup. He wanted to delve deeper into the potential risks of quick integration. His response seemed more thoughtful than anticipated, indicating David wasn't completely controlled yet. I concur with your reservations, I said, acknowledging his hesitation. The West Coast market functions differently from our traditional East Coast operations. Our distinct systems were developed to cater to these differences. Harrington responded, in essence, maintaining separate operations adds unnecessary complexity. Given the current leadership transition, this complexity could prove detrimental. I countered, perhaps it serves as a safeguard instead. For decades, our corporation has relied on the independent verification of financial reporting within its divisions as a fundamental aspect of corporate governance, which my father strongly emphasized. Upon hearing his name, several board members seemed uneasy. Despite any corruption that may have tainted the upper echelons, William Bennett's reputation for integrity remained significant. Reynolds conceded that William appreciated robust controls, but also recognized the necessity for change. Before his stroke, we had spoken about updating our methods. However, this statement was delivered with such conviction that I might have doubted it myself had I not accessed my father's private files. In truth, my father fiercely resisted every proposal to centralize financial controls under Reynolds. I expressed an interest in reviewing the minutes from those discussions for a better understanding of our past as we forge ahead. Reynolds and Harrington shared a glance at this statement. Harrington clarified promptly that the discussions were informal and pertained to strategic planning sessions instead of recorded meetings. I nodded, subtly tinting my voice with doubt. Well, I said, given we're at the halfway point of the quarterly reporting cycle, making immediate changes presents unnecessary risk. Why not finish this quarter using current systems and introduce changes for the next reporting period? That gives us time for careful planning, staff adjustments, and system testing. The idea seemed rational enough that dismissing it would invite obvious suspicion, even among board members unaware of the underlying deceit. I believe that's a good idea, David concurred unexpectedly, catching me off guard. There's no need to hastily implement changes during my initial tenure as CEO. We can use this quarter for in-depth evaluation of the integration plan. Reynolds displayed obvious displeasure but recovered swiftly. As CEO, David, if you prefer, we can adjust the schedule. But I need to stress that delaying integration could prolong existing issues in our financial reporting. You inquired about specific problems. To which, David? I responded. The question was sudden and direct, not something I anticipated from my assumed subordinate. However, it's more about maintaining process integrity than revealing specific weaknesses. Difficulties in reconciling independent systems lead to inefficiencies. Yet we have been managing these reconciliations effectively for years. Our auditors have continuously endorsed our financial controls. Harold Winters, another board member mentioned in my father's documents, intervened to defend Reynolds. He suggested that the rapidly changing media landscape might render past practices ineffective, especially as we pursue potential strategic partnerships. This statement caught my attention right away. What partnerships are under discussion specifically regarding Bennett Media Group? Harrington coughed before responding. That's a matter for another gathering. However, we've had initial talks with several prospective investors intrigued by Bennett Media Group's market standing. Are these investors looking to invest or buy? I probed. This direct question caused a slight discomfort. Multiple board members appeared taken aback, suggesting not all were privy to these discussions. Merely exploratory dialogues, Harrington replied cautiously. No formal offers have been considered. Yet his eyes conveyed a different narrative. The plan seemed further along than he was letting on. I wasn't aware we were contemplating ownership changes, David stated, his voice now sharp. This seems like information that should have been shared during succession planning deliberations. It's incredibly preliminary, Reynolds reassured David. In the current converging media landscape, I observed my brother's self-assurance escalating as he assumed control. As CEO, I require a thorough debriefing on all related discussions so far. All relevant documents, contact logs, any preliminary evaluations or proposals should be included. Harrington nodded in agreement, though his friendly demeanor concealed a hint of strategy. We'll compile a detailed summary, he said, David E.T. specifying that it be done by tomorrow, catching me off guard with his briskness. That's quite hasty, Reynolds contested, expressing concerns about gathering everything in such a short span. By tomorrow, David reiterated forcefully, this company won't be sold without my full grasp and consent of the reasons. My father founded Bennett Media Group as an independent voice in journalism. That heritage demands careful examination. The conversation then moved to other transition issues, yet the atmosphere subtly transformed. David displayed an unanticipated boldness, causing the intricately planned scheme to face obstacles. By the meeting's end, 2 hours later, I had achieved my main goal, delaying modifications to the financial reporting systems until the quarterly reports were filed. The subsequent disclosure of possible sale discussions offered a new perspective on their haste. After everyone else left the conference room, David caught me behind and discarded his usual CEO composure. He stated directly, something seems off. He mentioned that Reynolds and Harrington had been advocating for financial consolidation while simultaneously pursuing a potential sale of the company, which he found suspicious. My opinion of my brother increased significantly upon hearing this. His financial knowledge might be questionable, but his intuition turned out to be more reliable than people thought. I nodded, aware of the sensitive nature of the topic. Is there a reason for this centralization of operations when the potential buyer would likely introduce their own systems? David scratched his head, mirroring our father's gesture during his troubled moments. Perhaps it's to regulate financial reporting before rigorous scrutiny by prospective buyers. This observation caught me off guard. Indeed, that's an astute observation. Dad always emphasized that buyers examine the last 4 quarters' performance above all else when assessing media firms. David explained further. If our financial records were problematic, controlling the reporting systems would be crucial before putting the company up for sale. This was a decisive juncture. How much confidence could I place in David? What should I disclose? I must share something with you, I decided. David gave a nod, comprehending the necessity of prudence. My home, he specified. Tonight following supper, in the presence of Mom. We can express this as discussing Dad's private belongings. It fits perfectly. We then rejoined others for subsequent transition meetings throughout the day. I assumed the role of a supportive sister, offering useful advice while appearing content with my insignificant position in the new arrangement. Simultaneously, I utilized breaks to communicate with Michael Reeves via the secure phone, informing him about the meeting's progress and David's unforeseen possible alliance. Proceed with great care, Reeves advised. They might be testing his loyalty by suggesting a sale. Be vigilant for signs he's communicating with Harrington or Reynolds. My brother isn't skillful enough to feign his response, I assured him, and he has always been forthright about his aspirations. He desires to manage the company, not sell it. Nonetheless, tread with caution. If they think you're forming an alliance with David, they may speed up their plans or resort to severe actions. That night at my mom's house, dinner turned out surprisingly peaceful. The initial shock of Dad's death was subsiding into a somber acceptance. My mom recounted stories from the early days of the company, tales I'd heard before, yet they now seemed significant in light of the dangers to his legacy. He took great pride in both of you, she said, looking at us alternately, David and me. He often spoke of your complementary talents, referring to David's instincts and people skills, and my financial aptitude and strategic foresight. He believed that together, you could elevate Bennett Media to places he never managed. David and I exchanged looks, feeling the burden of her words between us. Could it be that our father had planned for us to lead jointly instead of choosing one over the other? Did Dad ever express worries about anyone at the company? Asked David cautiously. Any issues with the leadership or disagreements? We pondered this. For the past few months, he had been working odd hours, taking work home, and having quiet phone conversations. I thought it was just business problems. But she hesitated. But what is it, Mom? I inquired softly. He said something peculiar about a week before his stroke. We were discussing retirement plans, and he said, everything depends on getting the house in order first. Some things need fixing before I can leave. When I asked what needed fixing, he simply replied, the foundation has cracks that no one else can see yet. Another piece of the puzzle falling into place. My father had been preparing to tackle corruption before his stroke occurred. After dinner, David and I left to examine the boxes containing personal items from our father's office, as we had planned. In David's car, en route to his Georgetown brownstone, it was my mother who appeared pleased to see us working amicably. Rather than the professional rivalry that had marked our relationship for years, it was David who broached the subject first. So, what couldn't you share at the office? I started. It's complicated. I suspected that before his stroke, Dad uncovered significant financial misconduct within the company, potentially involving Reynolds and Harrington. To my surprise, David didn't show as much shock as I anticipated. I've had suspicions about our finances for months, he conceded. The dividends have been rising while our real audience metrics have been falling. The figures just didn't add up. You picked up on that? I asked, taken aback. He returned a wry smile. Though I might lack your financial acumen, I can discern fundamental discrepancies. Once I posed questions to Reynolds, he responded with a condescending lecture on revenue diversification tactics that offered no clarification. In his study, we found ourselves isolated from potential eavesdropping devices. With trepidation, I chose to disclose everything. The letter bequeathed by my father, the proof of financial misconduct, the intended sale of the company, and the provision that would delegate authority to me within 60 days. David remained silent throughout, his countenance shifting from worry to wrath to determination. Upon concluding my revelation, he was quiet for a prolonged period. Everything now falls into place, he eventually said. The manner in which they've controlled me, restricted my access to financial networks, hastening this consolidation plan. They're not preparing me for leadership. Instead, they are manipulating me as their marionette while plundering the company and orchestrating its sale. They must manage all financial reports prior to quarterly submissions and thorough scrutiny by potential purchasers. He queried, catching me off guard with his swift endorsement of my mission. How can we prevent them? I questioned his faith in me. In this way? He looked me straight in the eye. You're my sister, he said. We've been professional rivals for years, but I've never known you to deceive. And what you're stating aligns too perfectly with the discrepancies I've observed. His unanticipated trust was surprisingly touching. Furthermore, he continued with a faint smile. Why would you fabricate a tale that concludes with you acquiring control of the company through a hidden codicil? If you were inventing something, you'd devise a situation where you gained control instantly. His reasoning was sound, and I found myself smiling despite the seriousness of our predicament. So, what's the strategy? He asked. Once more, should we initiate the override and enact the codicil immediately? I shook my head. Not yet. More solid proof? Indisputable evidence of the fraud is essential for court acceptance. Currently, we have my father's doubts and indirect proof, but not the damning evidence to instigate criminal proceedings. We also need to identify everyone involved, David pointed out. Not just Reynolds and Harrington, but eradicate corruption altogether. Agreed. I admired his strategic mindset. The quarterly filings offer us a chance. If we can retrieve the untampered financial data before Reynolds makes any adjustments, we can establish the fraud beyond doubt. I could request direct access to all financial systems, David proposed. As the new CEO conducting due diligence, it's reasonable. However, Reynolds will monitor what you access, I warned. We must be more discreet. David pondered for a moment. What if we use Richard Anderson? As corporate counsel, he has independent access for compliance purposes. Wise suggestion, I agreed. Dad had faith in him and was aware of the codicil. I'll give him a call. Richard responded promptly when I utilized the secure phone. Following an explanation of the predicament, including David's role, he provided cautious guidance. I can navigate financial systems via legal compliance procedures, he verified. However, Reynolds will also be monitoring those pathways. We need to think carefully about what we seek and when. What's your recommendation? I inquired. The quarterly audit preparation commences next week. In my capacity as corporate counsel, I regularly scrutinize documents prior to their submission to external auditors. This provides me with a legitimate reason to access original transaction data without raising suspicion. But won't Reynolds have already altered the records by then? David questioned. Not always, Richard clarified. Financial manipulation of this scale requires a methodical approach. They can't just modify figures without creating detectable inconsistencies in their tracks. They must fabricate reasonable transactions to explain the inconsistencies between real and reported data. These transactions have a trace, a digital trail. Ah, I see, I acknowledged. They're leaving traces. Yes, indeed. And it's even more crucial when we can compare system data prior and post their alterations. Richard paused thoughtfully. There's another alternative, but it's more hazardous, Richard continued. William installed a specific auditing program on the financial servers before his illness. This tool, a forensic device, records and timestamps all financial transactions. I have the login credentials. This was fresh knowledge. Dad never mentioned this in his letter. It was put into place quite recently, Richard elaborated, just weeks prior to his ailment. I assisted him in its installation through an external cybersecurity firm to ensure no internal IT personnel were aware of it. It's been secretly documenting everything since then. That could be our smoking gun, David commented eagerly. Can we access the logs remotely? Regrettably, that's the problem. We can't. The software was intentionally segregated from outside interference for safety purposes. Data needs to be manually obtained from a designated station within the IT department. I pondered over our choices. It's too conspicuous. If either of us tries to access that station, Reynolds would be notified instantly. What if someone else, David proposed, someone who might have a legitimate reason for being there? I nodded. I've been contemplating that option. The head of IT security, Janet Kwan, collaborated extensively with your father on diverse cybersecurity projects. He had full trust in her, and she doesn't seem to be associated with Reynolds or Harrington in any significant way. Can we rely on her for this? I questioned, hesitant about involving more people in our secrets. I think so. She assisted your father in installing the monitoring system, although she wasn't informed of its specific function. He told her it was a security measure against external hacking. We must proceed with caution, David advised. If there's a breach, or if Janet Kwan learns about our investigation, I'll manage the situation, Richard reassured. We, meaning all of us, would be involved. I could meet with her under a false pretense, a security compliance review, to gauge her responses before disclosing any sensitive information. We spent an hour constructing a well-thought-out plan. David would pretend to be a freshly appointed CEO getting acclimated, requesting general updates from all departments without drawing attention to finance. I was to return to California as scheduled, maintaining regular operations while covertly making duplicate copies of all West Coast financial data. Richard would interact with Janet Kwan and, if she proved reliable, facilitate the retrieval of the monitoring program's data. Considering another resource, I suggested Michael Reeves, who had been independently collecting evidence, having been hired by my father as a private investigator. Should his perspective prove valuable to us, can he join discreetly without causing alarm? David inquired. I verified that no one at the corporation is aware of his affiliation, as he's been working covertly for months. The meeting was agreed upon to be held at a secluded location, far from any Bennett media connections. As we arranged the details, an unusual blend of feelings stirred within me. Our father's passing still left an open wound, yet it now bore the promise and glimmer of redemption. We had an opportunity to protect his heritage and unmask those who deceived him. Upon our parting, David escorted me to my car. Before I drove off, he unexpectedly enveloped me in a hug, an action long absent between us. I'm sorry, he whispered softly, for allowing the rivalry between us to grow so rancorous. Father was correct. We are stronger united than we ever could be apart. I echoed my apologies as well, genuinely touched. Through this situation, he proposed a shift in our vision for Bennett Media, one where we share leadership instead of one person taking charge. This idea came as a surprise, but it felt fitting. It seems like Dad might have been preparing this all along, using the crisis to make us acknowledge each other's strengths. David concurred with a tinge of sadness. Always the strategic thinker, even from beyond the grave. The next day, I participated in a series of transition meetings at our headquarters, preserving the image of the cooperative, while the division head prepared to return to California. Reynolds appeared more at ease, seemingly confident he had delayed any challenge to his financial consolidation plans. During a break from our appointments, Harrington casually approached me with his typical suave demeanor, saying, "Olivia, I've been wanting to discuss something personally with you." He attempted to convey an air of concern. "Given your significant input to Bennett Media Group, I can understand that this transition might be challenging," I stated matter-of-factly. "Exactly the kind of mindset we require," he acknowledged. "This is why," he explained, he wanted to talk about my potential future role more specifically. He mentioned that the West Coast division has thrived under my management, but with the proposed integration, there could be chances for me to broaden my responsibilities in different areas. He subtly hinted at possible future benefits if I were to cooperate now. "I'm always ready to discuss how I can help the company," I responded vaguely. "What did you have in mind?" He inquired implicitly. "The board is contemplating establishing a new role, Executive Vice President of International Development. Given your accomplishments in expanding our footprint in California and the Asian Pacific region, you would be an ideal fit for this position. Our global strategy." The proposition took us by surprise, as Bennett Media Group has limited international operations, and expansion was not part of our previous strategic plans. This new role could either be a superficial title meant to appease me, or more plausibly, a method to relocate me away from daily operations where I might uncover financial discrepancies. "That's an interesting thought," I said, pretending to be interested. "Would this position require staying in California or moving to headquarters?" "We anticipate a substantial travel component," Harrington answered calmly. "Areas such as Asia, Europe, potential markets in South America. You would have offices in both New York and London, with a generous budget for market expansion." Just as I anticipated, they aim to keep me distant from the company's financial hubs. "It seems intriguing," I replied with feigned cheerfulness. "I look forward to reviewing a formal plan once the initial transition phase is over." As Harrington departed, I couldn't help but admire the intricate maneuvers designed to diminish my influence while preserving their facade. They viewed me as a potential danger, yet opted to control that risk through diversion instead of open conflict. That very afternoon, I convened with my California team via video call, sharing transition updates while covertly evaluating those who might offer operational assistance during our inquiry. My West Coast Division CFO, Priya Sharma, had consistently shown unquestionable integrity and meticulousness. If anyone had spotted discrepancies between the regional financial reports and the consolidated finances from headquarters, it would likely be Priya. After the formal meeting concluded, I requested Priya to stay behind for a private discussion. "Priya," I said, once we were alone, "I have an atypical request. I'd like you to personally scrutinize all our financial transactions from the past year, focusing on how the reported figures were handled in the consolidated statements from headquarters." A pensive expression crossed her face. "Are there particular issues I should focus on? Inconsistencies in revenue recognition, unforeseen adjustment entries, alterations in accounting methodologies between what we submitted and what was included in the final reports?" Priya's keen eyes narrowed. "This goes beyond standard reconciliation, doesn't it?" Although I trusted her, prudence was still required. "To put it simply, I'm conducting a comprehensive review of our processes during this transition. End of story. If something appears odd, record it thoroughly and discuss it privately with me. I've observed some discrepancies in the way headquarters has been dealing with our digital advertising income. Nothing illegal, but it doesn't align with usual accounting practices. This caught my eye right away. Could you explain more? In our last 3 quarterly reports, I flagged several significant digital advertising contracts where the revenue recognition seemed advanced at the combined level compared to regional reporting. When I asked about this, the explanation from headquarters finance was that they were adopting a more aggressive interpretation of revenue recognition standards based on contract commitment rather than service delivery. "And you don't agree with that viewpoint?" "It's technically justifiable but unusual for a media company," she clarified. "It wasn't uniformly applied. Instead, it was limited to selected contracts involving particular clients such as Meridian Investments, Atlantic Partners, and Vista Horizons Group." I inquired about the identities of these clients. Priya glanced at her notes and replied, "Primarily Meridian Investments, Atlantic Partners, and Vista Horizons Group. Although the names did not initially resonate, I made a mental note to correlate them with my father's records." I appreciated Priya's diligence and said so, asking her to continue her examination and report back to me with any further findings. After terminating the call, I texted Michael Reeves about the 3 companies. He returned my call within 20 minutes on a secure line, informing me that they were shell corporations. These corporations seemed legitimate advertisers, but traced back to a holding company called Apex Consortium. The intriguing part was who controlled Apex Consortium. The intricate web of ownership is gradually being untangled by your father's investigation, revealing that Thomas Harrington could be the primary beneficiary, using trusts and offshore corporations. The puzzle seems almost complete. It appears that Harrington is essentially funneling money to himself via falsified advertising agreements with Bennett Media Group. This is accurate. The funds move from Bennett Media to these dummy companies, then are redirected back to Harrington and possibly others involved in the scheme. As Bennett Media records these payments as legitimate income, it enhances the company's financial performance artificially. Consequently, the company appears more attractive to potential buyers, Reeves concluded. Given the size of these transactions, they could be boosting the company's valuation by up to 40% before a possible sale. We must provide irrefutable evidence for all of this, I said. Can we arrange a meeting with David and you tonight to discuss our future plans? I have secured a confidential location. It is a private room at the West Bridge Hotel, registered under a pseudonym. I will text the specifics to this number. Later in the evening, I received a call from Richard Anderson with updates regarding Janet Kwan, the IT security director. He said, I met with her this afternoon. Our conversation began with general cybersecurity discussions, protocols, then delicately brought up the topic of your father's unique monitoring system. Her response showed immediate and authentic concern over its proper functioning following his demise. Do you believe she can be trusted? He added. Yes. When I implied there might be issues with internal financial systems, she mentioned, it turned out that she had observed irregular access patterns to the accounting databases in recent weeks, including after-hours logins, bulk data exports, and alterations to transaction journal entries. Did she report these suspicious activities? She reported them to Marcus Reynolds, the head of finance, as Richard detailed. He mentioned it was part of a scheduled system overhaul and database cleanup before software transition. I observed wryly that the explanation seemed convenient. When I proposed there could be more at stake, she grew alarmed. She held Reynolds in high regard and appeared troubled by the idea someone might undermine systems he had constructed. Had you shared your suspicions with her? Not directly, but I managed to persuade her to participate in a confidential security assessment, authorized by both you and David as Williams's children, despite the traditional hierarchy. Excellent. Does she have access to the monitoring and data? Yes, but she must proceed cautiously to avoid detection. She proposed visiting on Saturday, when the office is largely vacant, supposedly for routine security maintenance. This Saturday, then? Yes, as it aligns with our interests. The quarterly financial reconciliation initiates on Monday. Thus, it's crucial to have undistorted data prior to Reynolds and his team carrying out their adjustments. In the ensuing 48 hours, events unfolded rapidly. David and I convened with Michael Reeves at a secure hotel location, pooling our intelligence and devising an action plan. Janet Kwan successfully procured the monitoring program data, furnishing us with indisputable evidence of systematic financial tampering spanning almost 2 years. The deceit was far more expansive than we'd previously apprehensive, totaling over $18 million in falsified income, manipulated expenditures, and misdirected funds. By Sunday night, we had compiled a thorough case file encompassing every facet of the scam. The evidence was overwhelming: forged advertising contracts, invented revenues, secret payments to shell corporations, and explicit communications among Harrington, Reynolds, and 2 other board members detailing a revenue enhancement strategy and plans to boost valuation prior to the sale. The most incriminating piece of evidence was a recorded discussion between Harrington and Reynolds, discussing the need to hasten the timeline following my father's stroke, with Harrington explicitly saying, with William out of the picture, we can now advance unhindered. With Richard Anderson's advice, we chose to execute the Codicil override. The damage to the company was clearly imminent and irreversible. Already in motion were plans to reveal a potential sale to international media conglomerates, a corporation infamous for breaking up acquired companies and selling off their assets. On Monday morning, I arrived at headquarters alongside David. Instead of attending the planned executive committee meeting, we moved directly to the boardroom where Richard had assembled an emergency board session with directors not suspected of fraud. Janet Kwan and 2 reliable IT staff members fortified the building's systems during the night to prevent any last-minute tampering of evidence. Upon Harrington and Reynolds' arrival, Confusion swiftly escalated into alarm as they encountered not just David and me, but FBI and SEC agents who had been discreetly involved in the case since the weekend. "What is the purpose of this?" Harrington exclaimed, showing signs of distress in his usually composed manner. "Thomas Harrington and Marcus Reynolds, your positions are terminated at Bennett Media Group instantly. Federal authorities are present to scrutinize financial fraud, securities breaches, and potential criminal collusion." Shock flashed across Reynolds' face when he discovered David wasn't as pliable as they thought. Almost a sense of satisfaction washed over Richard. His gaze shifted to you, laced with dawning horror, as comprehension began to set in. "This is absurd," Harrington spluttered. "You have no power." Richard countered, placing a document on the table. "Actually, Ms. Bennett has controlling authority, effective from this morning." The codicil in William Bennett's will was activated, transferring major ownership and leadership to Olivia Bennett immediately. The room descended into turmoil as agents served warrants, and the uninvolved board members reacted with shock at the evidence presented. Through it all, David remained by your side, forming a united front that finally embodied our father's true intentions for the company. The ensuing weeks were demanding but transformative. Harrington, Reynolds, and their accomplices faced federal charges. 3 board members resigned promptly. Initially, the company's stock fell following the revelation of fraud, but it recovered upon announcing a revised management structure. With David assuming the role of CEO focusing on content and external relations, me as chairwoman, and the CFO overseeing strategy and financial integrity, we aim to restore Bennett Media Group according to our father's original ideals. 6 months later, addressing shareholders for the first time under this new leadership at the podium, I saw my mother in the front row with tears of pride in her eyes. Established on principles of integrity, independence, and journalistic excellence, Bennett Media Group was to recommit to these founding values while forging a path into the future not as individuals pursuing personal goals, but as a united team leveraging diverse abilities towards a shared objective. David stepped up next to me at the podium, the message of unity evident to all. What our father bequeathed wasn't merely a corporation. He also imparted a legacy of bravery, honesty, and foresight that surpasses any individual. Collectively, we celebrate this legacy not by maintaining the past, but by constructing a future befitting his reputation. As we concluded our speech met with thunderous applause, I pondered over the path that led us to this point. A tale of deception and estrangement had morphed into an unforeseen alliance with my sibling, making both of us more robust than either could have been individually. The concealed clause didn't just alter the ownership of the company, it transformed us, mending family rifts and producing something superior to what we had envisioned possible. That was our father's actual last present, not the company itself, but the discernment to realize that we were destined to manage it together. Following this, you'll find 2 more remarkable stories waiting for you on your screen. If it strikes the target, you won't be able to resist not looking at them. Simply click to explore.